A good day and a warm welcome to everyone, and welcome to this edition of the BOS Video Journal Club. And today we are in conversation with a dear friend of mine and our eminent member, Dr. Vaibhav Bagadia. For the past few editions of the Video Journal Club, what we have been doing is we have been critiquing certain articles which have appeared in our journals, which had the potential to change our practice or which have affected the way we look at certain clinical problems. Today, we decided to do something different. Rather than reviewing articles which have appeared in different journals of foreign authors, we have chosen a few articles which have been written, and these studies have been conducted by our very own members and have gained acceptance in our peer reviewed journal. One of the articles and one of the studies that came across was this one, which appeared in the knee surgery and related research. And this was the feasibility of a direct adductor canal block as a part of the as a part of periarticular injections, which we use for pain relief in total knee arthroplasty. This was an investigation conducted by Dr. Vaibhav Bagaria, along with his team of Dr. Anup Damangaonkar, Dr. Dipit Sahu, Dr. Kulkarni, Anisha Walvi, and Himanshu. This was conducted at the HN Hospital and some medical colleges in the city of Bombay. Why is this paper relevant? This paper is relevant because, I mean, now we have moved away from the neuraxial blockages, from giving opioid analgesic, and we are very fast moving towards the era of accelerated discharge and faster recovery following knee replacements. This pandemic has also highlighted the need for the patient to go home early and him to be very safe at home. So, is there something better than we could that we could do following a femoral nerve block, which had its own set of problems by inhibiting the quadriceps, the epidural analgesia, which we all know fast went out of favor, to local infiltrating the joint capsule. So adductor canal block usually is done by the anesthetist. It is done after the surgery is being done, and it leads to a lot of apprehension amongst a lot of surgeons that we are letting the anesthetist come near our field in closer vicinity to where we have just implanted a joint. This particular technique of a direct adductor canal block is a novel idea which was investigated. So this paper is a good paper because it deals with a CT arm and a radiological arm where they have studied around 30 adult knees of different ages, of different build, and looked at their CT angio films to mark out the landmarks where the femoral artery crosses the surgical field, the boundaries of the adductor canal, where it comes near the sort of our surgical area, which can be accessed to sort of anesthetize or access the sensory nerves, which can give adequate pain relief. This study also has a cadaver arm where they have done dissections after implanting the knee replacement prosthesis and done a lot of measurements. Why I found the paper very good was they have given different sort of measurements in the sagittal plane, in the coronal plane, and in references of certain predictable landmarks like the joint line. So whether we are doing a minimally invasive surgery or whether we are doing, let's say, computer aided or assisted surgery, the landmarks will remain the same. This is given by very simple sort of techniques which the surgeon can easily acquire as a part of his armamentarium, and we can use it. So it's a very useful thing to know for us, and it's a sort of easily reproducible one. The so I would like to at this stage, get Vaibhav in, and so Dr. Bagari, I would like to ask you what was your thought process before you sort of envisaged or you started, thinking about this particular technique and this particular paper.
No, so the initial spur to the whole study was the fact that the ultrasound guided adductor canal blocks given by anesthetists are too time consuming. So our surgical time you have come down to a significant degree where we finish our surgery in 45 minutes to an hour or hour 10 minutes, and you will see that after the surgery is finished, almost equal amount of time was being, I'll not call wasted, but was spent in prepping the patient, giving an ultrasound guided rectal canal block, which was in a way, I mean, it always spurred us to think that can we cut down this time and can we still be as accurate as what the anesthetist did?
Mm-hmm.
And it always came to our mind that we are just near the target area. So our target region of infiltrating the adductor canal was very close to the superior margin of our incision. So when we are just there as a surgeon, we always want to be in control. At the same time, I think the greatest fear in our mind is of a sepsis, or how the members of other allied surgical team, which is primarily the anesthetist, would address this biggest concern that we have. And at no moment I would say or suggest that all anesthetists are non-cognizant of the fact. So, but you will often find people are also casual about giving these blocks from the anesthesia team. So while some of them are really really good, we found that some of them did take this whole intervention very casually, and that kind of spurred us to think differently, and it kind of forced me to read more about the anatomy. And the fact that we are targeting a region and not a point made me think that it is possible to kind of do it ourselves.
Right. So this is where I wanted to come in. You just mentioned this thing about anatomy. The good thing about this paper is that it describes the adductor canal. It describes the adductor canal as a cylinder and a zone or an area. So when you go through this paper, there are certain high points, certain medial points, the adductor hiatus that Dr. Bagari has used, and these terminologies to describe the sort of course of the adductor canal. So would you like to sort of take us through, the thought process of the different points and different regions that you have used in your paper, mentioned it so that it becomes easier for us to understand? What are
So,
points
so
did
the first and foremost, yeah. So the first and foremost is the entry point. I mean, we needed to define where would we start our intervention from. So to our mind, it would be almost near to the superior margin of our incision, but it had to be consistent. So typically we chose a point 8 centimeter from the joint line as our entry point, which will be there in most surgeries. So as a surgeons, we know that this 8 centimeter proximal to the joint line is accessible to most surgeon and in most knees. So we chose that as an entry point. Now then we had some known facts. So we knew where the adductor hiatus was. It's a established terminology, and that's the lowest point of the adductor canal. We needed to find out what is the high point, and the high point is typically where the structures from the anterior compartment or the neurovascular bundle turns to the medial compartment, and at the same time it it is at a point where the motor branch or the nerve to vastus medialis is already out, so that there is no quadriceps inhibition. Incidentally, both of these points are same. So just before this neurovascular turns medial, it gives away the muscular branch. So the point or the high point is the point where, beyond which, if you had given an injection, you would have probably either gone too anterior or would have involved a muscular branch. So anything between, so the area of interest then becomes an area where we want to give it. And as you rightly said, it's not a single point but a cylinder, which is there from that high point to the lowest point, which is the adductor hiatus. So if you did, or if you injected that area between the high point and the adductor hiatus, which is what we call as low point, that would ensure that you have sort of given your infiltration in the area we desire. Now, the whole beauty of this concept of periarticular infiltration is to give high volume things, so that while you are not targeting a point, if you give a high volume anesthetic, then even if you have not touched the nerve or you are not very near the nerve, the effect of anesthesia would persist. And over time, we have all realized the value of periarticular infiltration, and it is the same. And that is why, if you look at the title of the paper, it is as a part of periarticular infiltration. I would not call it a block, but as an extension of periarticular infiltration that we give around the capsule, because the fundamental anesthetic technique remain the same: high volume, wide area.
Right. So, I mean, would you, be able to take the listener or us through, these target region and how to, where did you find the target region in your CT study, and did the cadaver study match it? So I'll put this slide on
Yes.
so that it becomes slightly easier for the viewer to understand where the points are.
Okay, so that black star that you see in this slide is our typical entry point. You will see that it is around 4 centimeter proximal to the anterior flange or the anterior border of the prosthesis, which is roughly corresponding to 8 centimeter from the joint line. And then if you go back to the previous slide for a second, so there are four things that we need to find out. One is so if you see from the entry point, which is the lowest point. So if you are between the lowest point and entry point, you have not gone in the target region. So you must cross the lower point and be in an area which is below the high point. So the target area refers to the area where you want to target your infiltration to reach. So
Right.
this is the whole thing. So if you go to
So
the table,
yeah. And how was this high point identified on the CT scans? I mean, you mentioned in your paper that you looked at all these CT angios and put them through a particular software. How could you identify these point if someone has to sort of reproduce this particular method?
yeah, so where the neurovascular bundle turns from the anterior to the medial compartment. So when the midline, so we took the cross section and where we found the bundle crossing from the anterior compartment to the medial compartment, that was considered as the high point.
Right. And this is a very reproducible point, which I would presume.
Yes. Uh,
Right. So
yes.
whether it's a short, stubby thigh or it is a long, you are not worried that this point is very easily discernible for the
Yes.
purpose of your
Yeah.
study. Yeah.
So it's an axial section. It's an objective measure.
Yeah.
So when you have taken an axial section, the moment it crosses to the medial compartment, that's your high
This is it.
point.
Yeah.
Yeah. And although, I mean, yeah, you made an important point about the height, and you will see that there is a very large variation from 14.3 to 25. So that is again the height dependent. So you'll see that again, coming to the fact that it is a cylinder, it gives a good leeway. So the target region varies widely depending on the height of the patient. And the good thing is that the lower region or the lower target region, which is the adductor hiatus, is not very far from our entry point. So
Right.
even in a very tall individual, our spinal needle will still reach the target region, meaning that it will cross the adductor hiatus. It may be in the lower third of the target region, but it is still there.
Right. So this table basically tells us that the distance to the target region, the mean is about 19, and the range was between 14 to 25 centimeters. Is that right here? And the entry
Correct.
point to the
Yes.
upper target region and to the lower target region. Now, the good thing about this paper is also that there are certain angles which are described, as I mentioned, in the coronal and the sagittal plane, which they have labeled as a alpha angle and a beta angle. Now, would you be able to tell us what these alpha 1, alpha 2 was for the benefit of our viewers?
Yeah, there's one more picture that I would want to show. No, no, one more. Just go back. One more. Yes. So if you look at the entry points here, there are two planes. One is the sagittal plane, and one is the coronal
Coronal
plane. So
plane.
if you
Yeah.
look at those, yeah. So from the entry point, we had two measurements to be made in angle. One is the entry point to the adductor hiatus, which is the lower point, and one from the adductor hiatus to the middle region. So they were the alpha 1 and alpha 2. The same 2 points in coronal plane were called as beta 1, beta 2. So because you need to be accurate in both coronal and sagittal plane. So
Yeah.
when I say accurate, meaning that you should be in that range to target the area. Once
Right.
again, I would like to reinforce the fact that the concept of high volume, large area infiltration is what was the basis of this whole hypothesis that it will act in that area.
Yeah. So, I mean, and what did you find then when you did this study on the angles? So, that simple take home would be what would be the simple take home from this particular point of view?
No, so for taller individuals, we found that we needed to be closer to the bone, so that more vertical, and for the stubbier or a shorter individual, you need to be slightly divergent from the shaft.
Right. So, at a
But
certain, yeah,
yeah, so but the range is not very divergent. I mean, so you have got, and as I said, because you are not targeting a single point, the degree of variation could be large, because these are two arbitrary points that we had chosen, but you
right,
could target any of the region between this area.
right. So, I mean, the take-home message for the orthopedic surgeon could be, entry about 4 centimeters above the flange. Uh,
Correct.
and if I have to take you back to the table where you have described the alpha and the beta angles, so in the coronal and the sagittal plane, where would you want the surgeon to angulate, or where would you sort of, try and angulate the needle to enter into the correct zone,
So around 30 degree in the A and 15 degree in the coronal plane.
coronal plane?
Yeah. So that is the midpoint of alpha 1, alpha 2 roughly,
Yeah.
and beta 1, beta 2.
Yeah, so basically that is from the shaft of the femur, you would or the midline of the thigh, you would want them to angulate in that particular direction. 30
Yeah.
degrees in the
So in the
sagittal plane,
frontal plane, 30 degrees and 15 degrees in the
posterior
coronal plane.
coronal plane. Yeah. So there is a wide. So did you find a wide variation amongst the different thighs that you dissected? Now you have dissected about 7 cadavers, and I mean I would say that these cadavers were of a particular age group. Was there a wide variation amongst the cadavers themselves? Because we would expect to see a wide variation amongst our patients, isn't it? There would be shorter patients, stubbier females,
No, so
males, taller.
no, so we did not do any measurements on the cadaver. What we did was we used this information that we had on the CT and use the same thing to inject methylene blue into cadaver to see whether we are accurately reaching the canal or not. So
Right.
if you look at here, we measured 8 centimeter from the joint line, marked it as the entry point, used a spinal needle to enter this. So you can see both the planes. So how I am entering this if you look in the first image, it is roughly 30 degrees that I am going. You need not, because you're not measuring, it could be anywhere between 20 to 40 degrees, but it's roughly 30 degrees that I'm doing. And on the coronal plane again, if you look, it's roughly 15 degree. And I inject the methylene blue. And once we injected it, we did the dissection of the canal to see if our methylene blue stained the subsartorial area. So if you see that it has reached to the point where the staining is in the subsartorial area, so this was to just um, confirm that what we had found, or whether the rough guesstimates that we had on a surgeon administrating this block actually reached the area where it was intended, or was it just a radiological exercise for measuring things. And
Right.
we found that the radiological thing gave us a basis of directing our needle, which of course had a very wide variation of or margin of error, because again, as I said, I reinforce the area that we are using a large cylindrical area that we are targeting in two different planes. So we had a very large margin of error. So you didn't, since you if you had to target a point, I'm sure
Yeah.
it would have been impossible by guessing. But because you are targeting an area, and we use what is called as aspiration withdrawal technique, which anesthetists teach. So you first reach that area, aspirate it, push a little injection, and then withdraw gradually, so that the
Right.
whole area is targeted.
Okay.
So it enhances or it multiplies your chance of success of reaching or targeting the area that you wanted. And again, as I said, high volume, wide area coverage. That's
Right.
the keyword.
Yeah. So what I mean, you found that the methylene blue was staining the part of the subsarterial canal or in the adductor canal. Now, a lot of investigators have highlighted the importance of a lower part of the adductor canal and the upper part of the adductor canal. So was that also that you were looking for, that whether you are staining the lower part of the adductor canal, which is the area of interest for all of us, and was it more accurate staying in that zone, or was the dye going all over the place?
No, so again, as I said, it was a withdrawal technique, so aspiration withdrawal technique. So that's the key. And if you'll give me an opportunity, I'll also show you a video where we how we use it clinically.
Yeah.
So the trick is to inject a few milliliters at the rail apex, or where your needle reaches, and then kind of inject and withdraw the needle, so that the maximum amount of your infiltration is deposited in the lower area. And if at all, if you are reaching the high area, it's just few mls. But because you are infiltrating the canal, it's the entire canal that is getting stained, more so in the lower area than the upper area.
Right. Now, very interesting that you mentioned that you would like to show a video. So I wanted to ask you. So the limitation of this study. I mean, this is I would say a study that is a preclinical one, where the investigator had an idea. They decided to chase it up with a radiological study. they decided to follow up that the radiological parameters with the cadaver study. And obviously, the next arm could be a clinical one, which is not described in this paper. So, having said that, have you sort of mirrored this into your clinical practice? Have you started imbibing this in your clinical practice, or that is something that we should wait and see?
No, so again, as you rightly said, the proof of the pudding is in eating it. So we actually submitted our data to the ethics committee for seeking an approval for doing this kind of study, and we have now been using, and we've used it in over 100 cases, and we have measured it and compared it with a ultrasound guided adductor canal block, and in 24 hours we have found no difference between the two techniques. And more interestingly, what we did was we did it in bilateral cases where we, in one hand, we injected saline, and on the other hand, on the other leg, we injected the anesthetic. And there was a clear difference in the pain scores, differential pain scores. So for the first time, we did differential pain scores for the right and the left knee, because normally we would just do a VAS score. So we did that, and the patient would clearly mention that the knee which received this direct adductor canal block was much more pain free than the one which received saline.
Right.
So that
Yeah,
study is in pipeline for the publication. Yes.
excellent. Now, coming back to the cadavers, now you described that you have dissected 7 pairs of cadavers, right? And then
Yeah.
injected. Now, can you tell us which of the authors has actually performed the act of sort of injection? Was it the senior author who's a consultant and who have experience in knee replacements, or was it a lesser experienced surgeon?
All were done by me only. So
Okay, so
so
they'll
yeah, I
and yeah, so that is what I wanted to ask. I mean, in your hands, this is reproducible, and every single time, if all the 14 times you could sort of stain the adductor canal, and your needle could be in the area of your interest. Yeah. So the message to an orthopedic surgeon would be definitely to sort of wait and see for the clinical study. But I'm sure that this study should spawn more ideas, and to sort of for the arthroplasty surgeon to devise ways and think of newer ways of giving a local sort of pain relief. A lot of talk has been said about IPAC and infiltrating the posterior capsule, and we do generally infiltrate the posterior capsule. So there's a different technique of infiltrating the posterior capsule where numerous tabs are gone. So do you think that this technique of injecting aspirating would be safe, as you are depositing certain sort of volume of fluid and then again withdrawing and going in a different direction?
no, no. So it's one direction. You're talking about our technique?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. No. So it's not injecting withdrawing. It's a single injection. So the moment you feel that you have reached your point, you inject and then keep injecting and withdrawing the needle. So it's not injecting, withdrawing, injecting. That's the key. So the track is one single. And the reason being that if by chance, which we did not have it in this cadaver study or even so far in our clinical study, that you have punctured a vessel and you are depositing a high volume, you don't want all your
Yeah.
local to go in. A small amount of local anesthetic, even if it has gone intravascular, these needles are very small. So normally they are smaller than an arterial puncture needle. So the biggest concern that people would have for this study is, of course, what if you puncture because it's a blind procedure, you don't know where your needle is going. What if you puncture a femoral artery or femoral vein? And it's a legitimate concern.
Yeah.
To which the answer is that normally people take arterial ABGs and you use a needle to withdraw the sample for that. It's in a way similar to that. And if you're injecting a diluted concentration of ropivacaine or bupivacaine, if you have injected and withdrawn the needle and you're depositing that whole infiltration on the track of your withdrawal thing, then the possibility of very high volume going intraarticular or intraarterial or intravenous is very small to cause any
Right.
significant clinical
Right.
side effect. So,
Right.
so this technique in that way, I mean, conceptually, of course, you would need a very large series to actually see
Yeah.
or say that this technique is 100% safe. And this is one of the drawbacks of whichever clinical study that we'll be doing in this particular study itself. That you would not know the amount of deposition that has happened in the intraarterial or intravascular, and whether it would lead to a substantial clinical symptom for it to be picked up.
Right.
In this particular study, we did dissect all our femoral arteries and sort out any staining which was there intraarterially. And fortunately, none of those 14 sites had any staining in either the femoral artery or the vein.
Right. So the other thing is, compare this to a live patient. We tie a tourniquet. There are short thighs, there are larger thighs, there are, sort of people who are more muscular. Now, combining your radiological data of 30 CT scans that you had seen, was there a wide variation in the length of the adductor canal per se, depending on the height
Yes,
of the
yes,
patient? Yeah.
yes, of course. As I said,
And
there's a
is there,
wide variation in.
I mean, would you have liked to do more number of CT scans? I mean, then you could have probably come up with a rough guide as to a guesstimate kind of a thing, that the shorter the patient, shorter the adductor canal. I mean, it makes sense, but still, a formula or so.
No, it does, and it is very intuitive. I mean, see, the data is all there, and of course, the larger data is always more robust and gives you more data points. So, but as I said, it did give us indicator, which you rightly said, that there is a wide variation in the length of adductor canal. The advantage is only that the length of this adductor canal is enough for us to reach our target region in all of our patients with a spinal needle. That's the key. The,
Right.
depending on one's anatomy, there will be variation, and that variation would have been very significant if we were targeting a single point,
Right.
because then it need to be
Yeah,
accurate.
so
Yeah,
the important thing is that there is no concern or issue reaching the target point and the lower part of the adductor canal. It is only the higher point of the adductor canal which anyways you would not want to reach most of the time. So whether it's a
correct.
shorter individual or a taller individual, this adductor canal and the point of and the, let's say not the point, but the region of interest is definitely
Region of
within,
interest. Yes.
whether you decide to do a minimally invasive surgery or whether you decide to do a very big incision surgery. Is that correct?
Correct.
Yes. And that
Yes.
that
Yes.
was
That is it.
Yeah, so that is a very important conclusion that one could draw from this cadaver and a radiologic study, and this obviously is a strength of this particular paper that they have been able to determine. I mean, this is another diagram which shows the target region and the relations of the femoral artery, the nerves to the entry point, and in the sagittal and the coronal plane as to what the direction of the needle should be. So all in all, a good thought process, a very fresh thought process, I think, for a very commonly encountered clinical problem that we are constantly, sort of trying to get on top of. I would presume, I have not tried it myself, but it's a very reproducible technique, and I'm sure at the next cadaver workshop, I probably will try my hands on one. And yes, as Dr. Bagadia said, it lays the basis for a clinical study. So, I mean, we would be interested in seeing if you have got any images to show how this actually works in a clinical scenario. So then we can have something to, work on. So, would you mind showing us certain videos or pictures?
Yeah, I'll show you a small video of how we do it clinically.
Yeah.
Allow me to share this screen, please. That's the entry point. If you look at this, you see that I'm using this long needle. That's the anterior flange, and approximately 4 centimeter proximal to it is where we are going. And this is a short video, and you'll see the technique that I was mentioning. See, it's going in. You feel a slight giveaway most of the times. Then you aspirate it. Just confirm that it's not intravascular. You've seen this. I've injected few amount, and then I will start withdrawing my needle and injecting it. So will ensure that the entire track from where my needle is coming out is infiltrated. So,
So
so
this is about
and as
30
you'll see,
degrees to the midline.
sorry,
Roughly about
yeah,
this is about 30 degrees to the midline. Is that
yes, 30
or is
degree in the frontal plane and around 15-degree in the coronal plane. So, what do you think, Ashish? Do you think it's reproducible?
I think it is reproducible. I mean, it's a very straightforward, simple one. We would be, sort of really interested in seeing what the clinical study looks like. And the advent of, let's say, IPAC, and there is a big study coming from Dr. Guruva Reddy, which is, I think, less published a couple of months back, that they have compared the IPAC and adductor canal block, which is given ultrasound guided. Again, this IPAC, which is the posterior capsular infiltrate in between the popliteal artery and the capsule. This again is done by the anesthetist under ultrasound guidance. So our sort of uh, I would say not concerned, but we are striving to take more things in our hand so that everything is sterile. Once the patient is sutured, closed, we just want to sleep well. That there's nothing wrong that's going to happen with indwelling catheters breaking, the adductor canal block not working, or let's say if it's not working, then the pain nurse not coming in. It's also doable for a lot of nursing homes and a lot of places where there are issues with ultrasonography and PCPNDT and those kind of issues. So I'm pretty much looking forward to your paper coming out. Anything else you would like to add on? I mean, so anything else you would like to add on if you have done it next time? I mean, would you like to increase the number of CT scans? Would you have preferred to do more number of cadavers and things like that?
Yeah, of course. I mean, see, the robustness of any study, and this being a journal club, I mean, I would like to always say that the more data that you have, the more robust study you have. And again, you being my friend, you have not kind of bashed up the study, so I'll take the onus on myself. So it's for all those present. I mean, first of all, yes, there should have been more numbers. 7 cadavers is good, but you would have preferred more number. The fact that all the injections were done by a single surgeon, who is the writer or the author of the study, again puts a question mark on the reproducibility of the technique. CT scan data, again, they were from the patients who had trauma. They are not representing an arthritic knees, so we don't know whether the anatomy gets distorted. Um, there was no height, weight, or any other parameters to which all these measurements were adjusted. So we would have loved to do all of those things. In addition, if given a chance, we should have taken an X-ray or at least a CM image while placing the needle to kind of correlate it with CT. Of course, you can't do a cadaveric CT in India, but that would have been an ideal thing. So if all things were there, we would have wanted the study to be more robust with at least a radiological backing of the cadaver study, meaning by conducting a CM candidate thing, so that we know what is the length of the needle. We have not standardized all the needles, so whether the entire country has the same length of spinal needles, whether the shape of the spinal needle matters. There are newer needles coming in these days which are blunt and allows injection from the side. What are the role of these needles when you are using this is important. Again, the type of anesthetic and the volume that these canal can accommodate is a question of debate. All of these are arbitrary. So there are a lot of arbitrary things that we have done and a lot of things which have been done on hunch. Having said that, most of the ideas or the original research comes from a hunch, and then it needs to be built on. And I think while I humbly accept there are a lot of criticisms and things about this, I think it's a starting point, and I would encourage a lot of people to become more and more Atmanirbhar, the buzzword of the last, the Oxford word of the last year.
Yeah.
So Atmanirbhar surgeon. So so the Atmanirbhar surgeon technique needs to be thought of.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you very much, Dr. Bagaria, for being with us. And I'm sure a lot of readers would or listeners would find it very useful. And we hope to see you soon. Thank you very much for interacting with us today. Thank you.
Always a pleasure. You're a good host. You don't bash up. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.